In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill, joined as always by Chris Herrington. It is lottery week, Chris. The week has arrived. We will know here in 4 days that whether or not the Grizzlies are going to pick inside that top four, if they're going to be 7, 8, 6. We know they won't be 5. But they will be somewhere inside of that top 10.
So do we want to do, since you bring that up, because I looked this up not long ago. I pulled this from a column I wrote a couple years ago, and I assume I didn't miss anything. I did not recheck my own work, but I added the ED draft to it. So we can do a little bit of the Memphis Grizzlies lottery history. The Grizzlies have never had the number one pick. They never had, and I'm talking about Memphis Grizzlies here. The Grizzlies, period, have never had the number one pick, but I'm not including the Vancouver stuff. They've never had the number 3 pick. They have been 2 a few times, a couple times, 4 a few times, but 1 and 3 are places they've never been. So this will be, unless I missed something, which is possible, but I don't think so, this will be the 12th lottery the Grizzlies are involved in since the move to Memphis. I am including 2001, where on the broadcast they were called the Vancouver Grizzlies, but at that point everyone already knew they were moving to Memphis, and in fact were physically in Memphis when all that happened. So if you include that, the Grizzlies have had 11 previous lotteries. They have gotten lucky, which means they've moved up. You can argue how lucky it was, 3 times. They have moved down 6 times. They have stayed put twice. So in 2010, they were 12th going into the lottery. They stayed at 12. They drafted Xavier Henry. 2020, they were 14th, stayed at 14. That pick went back to Boston in a trade. Those are the 2 times they stayed put. The move downs, 2001, they fell from 4 to 6, ended up drafting Shane Battier. 2002, they fell from 3 to 4, drafted Drew Gooden. 2007, they had the worst record in the league. They were number 1 in the lottery, fell to 4, and got Mike Conley instead of Greg Oden, which worked out okay. They probably would have taken Oden at 1, not Kevin Durant. 2008, they fell from 4 to 5, took Kevin Love, traded him to move up on draft night. 2018, fell from 2 to 4, got Jaren Jackson Jr. I will always be curious who they would have taken at 2. They would not have taken Marvin Bagley, but would they have taken Luka? I don't know. Then 2024, they fell from 7 to 9, Zach Edey. The 3 times historically they have moved up. In each instance, they jumped up to number 2. 2 of those ended up being like the worst draft situations in franchise history. The 2 of the 3 lucky situations. 2003, one of the great drafts ever. They jumped from 6 to 2, but they owed the pick due to a previous trade. They would only have kept the pick if they finished first. They jumped up to 2nd. That pick went to Detroit, who took Darko Milicic, and the Grizzlies got nothing. 2009, another loaded draft. They jumped from 6 to 2, took a look at James Harden and Steph Curry and said, we will take Hasheem Thabeet number 2. And then the most lucky they've ever gotten in 2019, they jumped from 8 to 2nd and got Ja Morant. So
what you're saying is that they're due.
I guess they've never gotten 1 and they've never gotten 3. I'd be super happy with 3 in this draft. That'd be great. So they've never jumped up to 1 or 3. They've fallen 6 times, jumped up 3 times. So luck has not been in their favor. You're going to write about luck more broadly this week, but luck has not been in their favor in their lottery history.
Yeah, you alluded to it, and we have plenty to talk about on the show. We should have mentioned that at the top. We'll talk about this. You have a column out about the wings in the draft. You will soon have a column out about bigs in the draft.
Yep.
You're getting ahead of this. See, I'm waiting post-lottery to start writing about some of these guys, but you're forging ahead. I guess that's all we can do right now, right?
Yeah, I have not ranked prospects to this point. I will rank them. I will synthesize and rank post-lottery, post-combine, but I'm just getting some thoughts down on paper, digital paper on the prospects right now.
Yeah. The pod, as I mentioned last week, the pod is going to the combine. So Chris and I will be there in Chicago, and we'll be getting information from some of these guys. So that will be good. We'll have plenty to talk about, I'm sure, at some point next week when we come back. And we have talked to some of these guys. But yeah, it's a fun week. It's kind of ridiculous. I was thinking about it as I started to work on this column about luck. And I don't even know how much of a basketball column it is. It is about the Grizzlies needing luck. And I don't mind, it's not out yet, but I don't know when it will be out, sometime before the weekend. I don't mind spoiling parts of it, but it's funny how, as I thought about like having hope in some things like this, the hope that you have, you kind of just bargain with yourself. You're like, come on, one time. I find that to be the case in a lot of these situations, and it's just kind of funny to me that, as you say, can we just get lucky one time? Like it sort of applies to the Grizzlies because they've never had the number one pick, and this is going to be the last time that the lottery is situated like this, and they are in a pretty good position, and it's never happened where a team that had the sixth best odds to move into the top four has moved into the top four. So they're just needing one time, just give us the one time. I think that's how you feel if you're the Grizzlies. And you would really like for this to be the moment when you move up. And as you noted, it really depends on what draft you're in, right? Whether or not you're going to come away with the true superstar. And this is probably the most highly regarded draft in the last decade or so. And so
yeah,
it's just,
yeah. But here's what's interesting about that, though. I do think this draft is very strong. Maybe there are people who disagree. I don't think this draft is unusually strong at number one. I think it's unusually strong at 3, at 5, at 7, right? Maybe even on down. Whoever you think is number one in this draft, whether that's Stebanza or Peterson or Cam Boozer, I think it's probably a B+ level first overall pick. I mean, the bar is extremely high for first overall picks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your A level, your A+ level is like LeBron and Wemby, right? I don't like. There was a thing earlier this year where someone, I think it was Jamal Mashburn, said Cooper Flagg would go 5th in this draft. Cooper Flagg would go 1st in this draft. And so I think you always, if you're first, you get anybody you want. So you want to be first. But when you think about the Grizzlies being at 6, the value of moving up, the positive value of moving up versus the negative value of being pushed down, is there more value in moving up 3 spots versus the cost of moving down 3 spots in this?
Yeah, draft? But there's a difference between 7 and 4 in this draft.
Right, but also between 9 and 7, maybe.
Yeah, we're talking number one though, right? Number one, I'm with you, but just moving into the top 4, I think is.
I think it would be great to be 3 or 4 in this draft. I think that would be a fantastic place to be.
Right. So I did go out across Memphis and go in search of places that may be deemed lucky. And I got a good history on different things in Memphis. Well, first of all, the first thing that got brought up to me was the time that Jerry West went to Silky O'Sullivan's because they had a lucky goat named Maynard. Do you recall that story?
I do recall that story. Yep.
He turned out to not be a lucky goat.
Yeah.
He was allegedly a lucky goat. A lucky goat. We should put it that way. Alleged lucky goat. That was one of the first things that came up. Not something I'm really touching on all too much in the column, but did learn some things about Memphis. We have a wishing well in Memphis in Memorial Park. Are you familiar? And a wishing chair.
No,
We have a wishing chair in Memphis and a wishing well in Memphis. I learned about, I went down to A. Schwab. I learned about hoodoo practices.
I've spent lots of time at A. Schwab. I know all about that. A. Schwab is super cool. Was even cooler when I was in high school when they still acted like they were an actual general store. You could go buy clothes and overalls and cooking equipment and all of that.
So I learned about hoodoo practices and luck. And I actually learned about a lottery that used to exist called the Policy.
Oh yeah.
on Beale Street? You're familiar, probably
Yeah,
because of Memphis music, right?
yeah.
Jim Jackson.
I want to say that if you read Bill Street Dynasty, Preston Lauterbach's book about sort of early days of Bill Street, it gets into that. That may be where I've read about that, but yeah.
Yeah. So Jim Jackson, I think the name. I hope
What
I'm
was I
Policy
heard the
Blues.
I
This
heard
is
the I heard the voice of a pork chop, also a Jim Jackson jam from back in the day.
so he wrote about well the one of the guys I talked to down there wrote two books about Memphis hoodoo, and there's also a museum, a Memphis hoodoo museum on the third floor, and he gave me a tour to talk about basically uh, African tradition carried to Memphis through slavery, and then the way that
Right.
African American people practice hoodoo in the South, and all the different things people would put in their mojo bag for luck, and the history of the policy, which is literally a lottery, basically, that
Yeah.
existed in Memphis. And then there's
For people who aren't familiar with Hoodoo, a lot of people saw Sinners last year. Hoodoo is a plot element of Sinners. The movie.
yes, and there's actually a nod to Sinners in the museum because apparently it was a very accurate portrayal of it. So learned a lot about that. There's also some Memphis sports history with hoodoo involving the Memphis Turtles baseball team back in the 1900s. And so basically, I just went all around the city of Memphis. I'm going to save some of them. I don't want to spoil all of them, but I went all around the city of Memphis in search of places and practices and traditions of things that might be considered lucky because I want to leave no stone unturned, Chris. We must do all the superstitious things for good luck this week if you are a Memphian. You must do them all. So I went and did them all myself. And it was actually really fun. I feel like I learned a whole bunch. So if you're interested in that, you can read the column and maybe go do something yourself to try to give the Grizzlies some good luck on Sunday when that comes around. Should we do our tankathon spin now before we talk prospects?
The last one.
The last one. I'm in a very neutral position here. So are you good or bad? Thumbs
We're
up,
gonna
thumbs
ride.
down.
We're riding with me this week.
Okay, we'll ride with you. I'll go first. We'll save the best for last. I got the Jazz jumping to number one.
Boo.
No good. Brooklyn at number two. Washington at number three. Sacramento at number four. The Clippers taking the Pacers pick at five, and the Grizzlies staying put at six, which isn't too bad.
Yeah,
If you
I
if
don't.
you offer
I don't hate that because I think there are lots of good players on the board at six, but I hate the Jazz jumping up.
now let's hear yours.
With mine, we have the Brooklyn Nets jumping up 2 spots to get the number one overall pick. We have your Memphis Grizzlies jumping up 4 spots
Woo!
to number two, where they would face an interesting decision, I think, assuming DeBanza went one among Peterson, Boozer, and maybe Caleb Wilson. I got the Wizards dropping 2 spots to three. I got the Pacers dropping 2 spots, but keeping their pick at number four, and then it falls from there with you have the Jazz and Kings getting pushed down. Couple notes about about lottery simulation. One, there are just an unusual number of teams in the West. I really don't want to get lucky. I,
Really?
I mean, who would bother you the least? I think somebody Sacramento. I mean, what are they going to do anyway?
I can tell you who'd bother me the most is the Thunder. No thanks.
Right. But you have the Thunder, you have the Dallas who just jumped up and got number one last year with Cooper Flag. Like, let's move on. Like, let's institute these rules quicker to keep them from getting the number one pick 2 years in a row.
I'm all good on the Warriors too.
You have the
I'll bet on
Warriors who
that.
have had their historic run. It's time to move on. You have the Jazz who like really were, I mean, given the talent they had, the most abject tankers of like the last 3 years. So the East teams I feel fine with. Like almost any of the East teams can win this lottery, and I'm more power to them. But it's really only the Grizzlies and the Kings who to me are not like undeserving like lottery winners. A second note: the tankathon thing is a lot quicker, so that's what we did. But have you seen the new ESPN lottery simulator that took them a while, but they put up I think in the last week?
No, I've not.
It's pretty cool. It takes longer to do, but that's because it goes pick by pick starting at 14. So you click for each one and it sort of plays out and mimics the way the broadcast would play out. It's kind of fun.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check that out after this. But if I offered you sixth right now, I said no opportunity to move up, but you will get sixth. What would you do?
See, this goes back to the question I asked earlier about the value of moving up versus the negative value of moving down. And when I played through this, and again, maybe the Grizzlies have a different feeling than I do on consensus. I just don't like getting to 8. I'm okay getting to 7. I really don't like getting to 8 if Fleming's, Acuff, Wagler are all off the board. You're sitting there at 8 thinking, do you take a swing on Mikal Brown? Do you play it safe with Braden Burries? I don't feel great about that. So I'm really torn on that. On the same time, I'm coming around. I do think that top 4 is a top 4. I really fear getting to 8 for the Grizzlies. I think that'd be pretty deflating. I think people can get excited about any of Acuff, Fleming's, Wagler.
For a long time, I think I probably would have tell you I would have told you if you give me 6 right now, I'll take it. But now I kind of, you know,
No, I'm not going to take
I'd
it
rather take the chance.
I'll take the chance because I'm okay dropping to 7, right? It's the dropping to 8. You had to drop 2 spots to get out of that range. I'm okay dropping to 7. Again, that's my read on it. The Grizzlies may have a different read. But I've not been able to get comfortable enough with a Brown or a Burries or whoever, Philon, Ament. I got Ament nowhere close to that, but like any of these guys, I've not been able to get comfortable with to not draw a line between 7 and 8.
You know, one of the questions that I've gotten a lot over the last couple weeks has been if you think anybody would allow any of these teams to like trade up. Like, what do you think it would take to get into that top 4 if you weren't? I think it'd be pretty pricey.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'd be easier to trade within that second range just because it's so point guard heavy. If you have teams that just don't really need a point guard, I mean, you have Utah who has Keontae George. You have Indiana. If they get pushed out of the top 4, they'll lose their pick. But the Clippers, who if they end up getting that pick at 5 or 6, they've got Darius Garland already. I think those two in particular are teams I think could move down if they're that 5-6 range if you need to move up. But yeah, no, I think you're looking at multiple picks to move up. Like if you were trying to move up, let's say from 7 to 4. Like, I don't think, 7 and 16 gets you 4, right? It may be 7 and 16 and an unprotected future first. And then even is that enough? I do think it's that kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, the worst scenario is like, can you imagine if OKC moves into the top 4? Because they could just say, yeah, we just won another championship and we could add a really awesome player to this roster right now and just be even better. Or they could just say, hey, we don't need a top 4 talent right now to just keep winning championships. So we're just going to trade it for someone else's house. And then we're going to be in the same position we're in right now for eternity where we just have a million picks in every draft.
I
That's
wonder
the
about
real terrifying one.
Yeah. I wonder about moving within the top 4 because it seems like it's a little eye of the beholder within the top 4. Like we've seen some of those trades in the past, like the famous one where Boston moved down, I think from 1 to 3. I think they got Tatum, right? For Markelle Fultz, like that kind of trade, which ended up, helping get them a title. I wonder about moving around within the top 4 among the teams who get there.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Utah, you would assume, given Utah's ownership, the connections to BYU, the Debansis stuff,
Right.
if Utah is targeting him, you would think maybe they would be if they were second and another team was first, you could hold them over the barrel a little bit and
Right.
try to, because you know who Utah wants,
Right.
if you followed any of that. So,
Well, let's say they're third, right? And maybe the team that's first, maybe it's the Grizzlies, maybe it's some other team. There are probably teams out there that have Cameron Boozer first on their board. That probably happens, right? And if you can move from 1 to 3 and still get Boozer and get multiple future picks or something, I don't know. Interesting
um,
stuff.
which team would you most like to get the number 1 pick outside of
Other
Memphis?
outside of the Grizzlies, I'm going. Let me go back let me go back to the original setup here instead of the mock that I ran. Um, I mean, the Pacers have always been one of my secondary teams, so I like that they've been sort of tanked their gap year for it. Not as much. Um, I wouldn't, Atlanta would be kind of fun. Chicago's had that kind of luck before with the Derrick Rose thing. So I would take like Indiana, Atlanta, Washington, one of those. Washington hasn't had much excitement in a while.
Do you think Milwaukee would get interesting if they were to jump into the top four with the Giannis stuff, or is that just so dead in the
Well,
over that it's just not going to happen?
I don't think the problem there is their pick is still mobbed up in the swap. So I
Oh,
think
that's right. I
if
forgot
they
about
jumped
that.
up, I think it would probably go to Atlanta, depending
Yep.
on what happened with the New Orleans
No,
pick.
that's right. That's right. I forgot about that.
I
I
mean,
was just trying to make up fun
well,
scenarios.
I mean, in theory, the New Orleans and Milwaukee picks could both jump to the top four, in which case Milwaukee would get a top four pick. Like that could happen. Um, and then you wonder, like, does that make you more likely or less likely to trade Giannis? For whatever reason, I can't get excited about Brooklyn. I think Washington, I would like for there to be an interesting basketball team in Washington. It hasn't been one like forever in my life, basically. I wouldn't mind them getting number one. That's fine.
Anyway, that's coming up Sunday, 2 o'clock. You'll be getting out of your Mother's Day brunch, I'm sure, and trying to find your way to a television. It's funny though. Another thing that I wrote about is that the lottery is such a preposterous thing that you're sitting there on pins and needles in between State Farm and Taco Bell commercials, waiting on something like this. And it's all because of the anticipation, right? Because the Grizzlies made this choice in January to pivot this way, and it feels like you've waited so long for this moment, which feels like a relatively high stakes moment. And the actual excitement of it is just like it's way less exciting than an actual basketball game, right? Them just reading off cards. So I don't know. I just find it to be a funny thing the way we handle ourselves during a lottery like this because the jaw lottery was clearly a where were you moment. Like I remember exactly where I was when the Grizzlies got the number 2 pick and we all thought maybe it was going to be number 1 and they were doing the commercials at like every 3 picks commercial,
Right.
and it just felt like a totally ridiculous thing to be watching on TV. But even then, it felt like it was, you know, it because I guess you bargain with yourself. It becomes more fun uh, in the moment, but just think about the excitement level of them reading cards off of TV versus playoff basketball. The contrast there is gigantic, and I find the whole thing to be a little crazy. And then I think we about to talked about this last week, but do you think that the proposed changes moving forward will have any impact on what happens, in this draft, like how teams sort of view the future? Somebody's going to get ahead of the curve on this, I would think.
Yeah, the question is sort of how you value future picks. I think that's something that people haven't gamed out. Maybe people internally have, but I haven't gamed it out. I haven't read much in terms of gaming that out. How you value future picks, both to trade away and to trade for, given that it's harder to bet on or bet against, quote unquote, short like other teams. I think the Grizzlies have sort of done that a little bit with Phoenix. It didn't work out for them this year, but they have other like Phoenix stuff coming up in the future, both in terms of swap. And I think they got the Phoenix maybe 2030 or 2031 in the Utah trade. And now you're in a situation where if these rules go through, and this has not been voted on yet, but if the rules go through as they've been publicly presented, there's a limit to that. Now you can try to bet on whether you think a team will be in the lottery or not, right? Are they going to be a top 7 team and thus not be in the lottery, or be a team outside the top 7 and thus in the lottery? But there's no betting on, are they going to be one of the worst teams in the league? They're going to have 40% odds versus 5% odds or whatever. It's sort of out of your hands a little bit. And the question I've seen raised is, does that make quantity more valuable in terms of targeting draft assets? Because if they're all darts you're throwing at the board, you just want more darts. And if that's the case, like, how do you value that from a trade standpoint? I don't really know the answer. I think it's hard to work all that out. I just do think that while I don't love the rules as presented, I do think they're better than what we have. And I do think it will lead to a better on-court product across 82 games for the most part.
Okay, let's talk wings. You have a whole story on it at the Daily Memphian, a column that's extensive and long, starting with the two that are probably at the top, but definitely in different tiers, Yaxel Lendenborg and AJ Debansa. Do you still feel strongly about Debansa being in that top two conversation?
The Bance is interesting to me. I've struggled with him a little bit. I have come around to the what feels like a relative safety with him, just because there's no one else in this draft who has his combination of size plus youth plus athleticism plus production. You have these questions with Peterson that we've talked about. You have questions with Boozer in terms of his athleticism, as a front court player. And like Debanza has all this. Something about him has sort of always sort of nagged at me a little bit. And looking at, and this is one of the only places, maybe the only place across three columns where I reference this, but on that side draft baller that we've talked about, when you go to the player comps, four of the most common comps it shoots up are exactly the kind of players that may have made me a little reticent on Debanza. It's Andrew Wiggins, Marvin Bagley, R.J. Barrett, Jabari Smith Jr. These are four players who were all considered elite prep prospects coming into college. They all went on to be top three picks, and they've all kind of disappointed as pros. Like Wiggins did make an all-star team. Like Barrett's a good player. These aren't busts necessarily, but they're all guys who were supposed to be great, and then they were good enough to great as college freshmen. They were top three draft picks, and they've all just sort of been guys a little bit. And I think they all have a similarity in terms of like they don't have that super elevated feel for the game. And I wondered about that with Debanza. I wondered about the feel for the game. I've wondered about the lack of defensive impact for a guy his size. And I worry about it a little bit. I do think he's a better prospect than those guys, which is easy to say in retrospect. But even like thinking about him coming out of college, he's bigger than Barrett by about 3 inches. And I think he's a more natural scorer than Wiggins or Smith or Bagley coming out of college. But it's the same kind of thing where I think he can't play the way he played at BYU and thrive in the NBA. I don't think. It's not going to be the give him the ball and just let him ISO and score. He's going to have to be a better off-ball shooter. He's going to have to be a better passer, which I do think he got better at in college. He's going to have to be more of an impact defender. Like it's sort of surprising how little he did defensively at BYU. And so I worry about all of that with Debanza.
I agree with everything you said, and honestly, I was also going to point out the player comps too, because when you switch the player comps to just offense instead of overall, it's almost even more scary because then it's like Alec Burks, Michael Beasley, Otto Porter, Jarrett Culver, right?
Right.
It gets even more dicey. I'll say in his defense, I do value the fact that he scored at the rim more than some of these other prospects. When you look at like Caleb Wilson, Cameron Boozer, those types. So I think that's a big plus for him. As I've said, it's just from an aesthetic standpoint, watching Darren Peterson and Cam Boozer looks like you're watching smooth, polished basketball players.
Right.
And there's moments offensively where Debanza clearly looks like that. But then there's also moments where he looks more like a freak athlete that's still uncomfortable in certain parts of the game. And so while I think he's probably a top two prospect, I think that you can have real debates on any of these top four. And if some team had him fourth on the board out of those four behind Wilson, Peterson, and Boozer, I would not be surprised, nor would I really push back on it.
Right.
So he is a fascinating prospect, but you're right. I think he does have a lot of the scary indicators. Another one of the players though that was on the player column offensively was Cooper Flag. So,
Right.
there's that too. He may turn out to be totally awesome, but I think there is some reason to be a little weary of it.
Yeah, I mean, the more I dug into it, the better I started to feel. I think the shooting will probably come around. He shot okay from three as a college player, but the form looks good. There's nothing there that suggests to me he can't improve as a shooter. The passing did improve over the course of his college season. He got better at that. And defensively, not all defense manifests itself in different ways, right? It may be that he is more of a Dylan Brooks kind of guy, in that he guard your man, contain your man, than a guy who's disruptive and like is generating a lot of defensive stats. I think given his size and athleticism, as long as the want to is there and the effort is there, he should be at least a league average defender. But I just think it's the thing where he's going to have to adjust because he went to BYU, not as talented of a college team. He's going to have to adjust and like not being the man, because I don't think his NBA future, the best version of him in the NBA is not going to be a guy who like is doing ISO offense, every possession.
Yeah, wingspan will be interesting at the combine, just because compared to Wilson, because Wilson's an inch taller but looks lankier, I guess. So I'll be interested to see if it measures 7 foot at the combine wingspan on Debansa. Anyway, we can move on. Yaxel Lindenborg, the next player you mentioned on your wing list, who is a very unique prospect to the draft.
And he's got a 7'4" wingspan, apparently, in a frame he's built like LeBron James, Jamal Mashburn, one of these kind of like, bigs, that he played like a legit combo forward at Michigan. He started at the 3 and then played the 4 when they did mixed lineups, and was great down the stretch, great in the tournament before he had to play hurt in the Final Four. He's a guy I think a lot of teams would be right to take a chance on, if you even call it a chance, in the lottery. I just don't like it for the Grizzlies because of where they're at as a rebuild. And so I don't think that's a guy, even if you slip to 8, I don't see that as a guy you take. I don't think he's going to be there at 16. I do wonder about the age stuff, and I know he could have been in the draft as a first round pick last year, but last year he still would have been 23, which also would have been old. Of guys who first round picks who were 24, who were age 24 as rookies this century, like, the last 25 years, the best of those is like Buddy Hield. There has not been a guy come into the league this old and be an all-star caliber player. It just hasn't happened.
Yeah, and obviously he has. I'll be interested to see how teams view him, like what he's going to profile as an NBA player, because in college he was like the Swiss Army knife that could do everything, like clearly a really good rim protector who shoots threes, and like that those players are valuable in the NBA, but is he going to just be a 3-and-D guy? And do you take 3-and-D guys in the top 10 of this draft? I don't know. He's got year-over-year improvement, which I think is a big plus when it comes to some of these players. But I don't know. I had a hard time trying to figure out who he's going to play like when he gets to the NBA, trying to envision it. Did you have any time to think about that?
If you're a team that's trying to win right now, like let's say you're Charlotte at 14, right? I mean, you've got LaMelo. You think your perimeter is locked down with LaMelo Ball, Con Knippel, Brandon Miller, right? At center, like, Diabate, Kalkbrenner, like, maybe you could draft Mara if he's there, but like you kind of have guys there. Your starting power forward is Miles Bridges, who's like 6'6". Like, is that a guy you could just plug in right away on that up-tempo team as a sort of a dynamic power forward, and like you're good to go? Like, to me, that's the kind of team that should take a chance on him.
Yeah, maybe. But he's a great defender, very good rim protector for his size, quick enough to move on the perimeter. So I don't really worry about the defense. Like, I think he'll be a useful defensive player in the NBA. But he's not like a incredible 3-point shooter. He didn't get to the rim very much.
He's more erratic shooter, yeah.
Add that in to the fact that he's much older than the rest of these guys. And it's just hard for me to imagine Memphis taking a player like that. One, on their timeline, but two, because, there's just other players that I think are going to have much higher upside in the top 8,
Yeah, I don't. And plus, I do wonder about some of the maturity stuff with him relative to his age. that we saw last year. So I don't like him as a Grizzlies candidate, really.
Okay, we'll move forward. I think one of the more controversial prospects going into the draft is Nate Ament at Tennessee, who I did go see at the SEC tournament. Talk to Rick Barnes about him as well, who I think has all of the physical tools you would want to be like a good NBA small forward. He's got the height. He's, got a good frame that I think he could really fill in, and maybe he'll turn out to be a physical specimen in the league that you want on your team. And every team is searching for, size that can play on the perimeter. And I think he is that type. But that said, his struggles all year long was playing through contact, being a reliable scorer for Tennessee, which is a team that struggled offensively through a lot of the season. Most of his shots were coming from the mid-range area. It was like it just felt like there was a ways to go for Nate Ament. And I totally think we could look up in 3-4 years and he's a much better player than he was his freshman season at Tennessee, and all of the projections coming out of high school were correct. But I don't think he really did himself a ton of favors with his one season in college.
So there's a draft research project I did the last time the Grizzlies were bad. The Jaren Jackson, John Morant drafts back then that I might update. We'll see where what happens in the lottery this week, but I may update between now and the draft and look at again. And Nate Ament sort of applies to this pretty specifically. And I looked at the success rate of different kinds of prospects based on how they were considered coming into college and how they did in college. And like one of the distinctions that I made then, some guys, I looked at like how the way players were considered as prep prospects coming into college and how they actually performed, right? And so some guys are just awesome on both, right? The elite. You were supposed to be awesome, and then you were awesome, and you got drafted. But when you break it apart to the other way, look at guys who were top 5, top 10 high school prospects who did not perform at that level in college and then got drafted as top 10 picks anyway based on that pedigree. And then you flip it around the other way, guys who were not top 10 level prospects coming in, maybe they were 20th or 30th or in Keaton Wagler's case later, right? But then they played that way in college. The success rate was way better with the second group. The actual college performance was a better indicator. And there's just a history of guys, and Ament may not get drafted this high, but in some mocks he's still there. There's a history of guys who were considered top 5 to top 10 prospects, especially on the wing in high school, who weren't that great in college and then still got drafted as high mid-lottery picks because of that. And it's not great. It's Cam Reddish. It's former short-time Grizzly Josh Jackson. It's Nasir Little, who got drafted later, but was like a top 3 player in high school and wasn't that good his 1 year in North Carolina and was a first-round pick anyway and never amounted to much. It's a guy like Zaire Williams. It's those kind of guys. To me, Cam Reddish is the poster boy for this. And to me, that's Nate Ament. And it's the kind of upside swing that if you're a rebuilding team, it may be worth taking and maybe it works out for you. But I don't have a lot of faith in guys who fit that, who fit sort of that framework. I don't think the history is great with them.
Yeah, just to revisit the Draft Baller website that I think we've both been using quite a bit, because they do the statistical player comps based on previous college performance players that have very similar statistical profiles. And one of the things that I've been looking at is they have like an NBA outcomes section on the website that essentially looks at players and their profiles, and then players that fit that profile, how often has the NBA outcome been that they turned into a star, or they turned into a good player, or that they turned into a rotation player. And one of the things that's really scary about Nate Ament is when you go look at his, player comps, there's some good players on there. But the overwhelming majority of them in terms of NBA outcomes has been negative, right? And this factors all of this, right? The offensive load, the BPM, everything included in his profile. So that's essentially data that backs up the point you just made, that players like this
Yeah.
more times than not
I
don't
mean,
turn out to be good. Sometimes they
again,
do. But
again, all evaluations are individual, right? So anybody could break a pattern, but I just don't. I'm wary of the history, and even to me, again, Cam Reddish is the poster kid for this. That people took him as a top 10 pick because he was always supposed to be a top 10 pick, even though he didn't play that way. And so maybe Amit comes around, but I also don't think I think he's big. He's a legit 6'10" who's comfortable playing on the perimeter, and that's a lot. That means a lot. But I don't think he really pops athletically or as a shooter. I don't see a lot of pop there other than the fact that he is good size, he's comfortable in the perimeter at that size. But I don't see a lot of pop with him. Ball handling, shooting, athleticism. I just don't see it.
we're moving now towards the 16 pick range, out of that top 10 range. Next on your list was Kareem Lopez.
Yeah, we can skip unless you have something to say about him. We can skip it. He's the mystery meat of the draft. I haven't. His feet look a little heavy to me in the YouTube I've watched, but otherwise I don't know a lot about him.
Okay, we'll move on. Dalen Swain, a player that I have liked.
So this is
quite a
an
bit.
interesting this is an interesting group of players to me because I've been thinking a little bit about sort of how the Grizzlies' first pick influences the 16th pick, right? If they stay in that 6, 7, 8 range and they draft a guard, then you're kind of open at 16 to take whatever, take a power forward, take a wing, maybe take a big. If they jump up into the top 4, let's say they get a Boozer or a Caleb Wilson, I don't think they're looking at power forwards at 16, and I don't think there are going to be guards worth taking at 16. So I think you're really looking at some of these wings. Like, would you take one of these wings at 16? Dalen Swain, Amari Allen, Cameron Carr, some of these guys. And I think there are certain draft paths where you have to take a hard look at that. And the other thing is the Grizzlies roster is not packed with this player type. It's not empty. You have Cedric Howard, you have G.G. Jackson, you have Jalen Wells. That's 3. But 3 is not a crowd when you're talking about bigger wings. Like, there's a lot of room for those player types. The Grizzlies have a lot of little guards and a lot of power forwards. They don't have a lot of wings. So I think the Grizzlies have to take a good look at these guys. Swain's interesting to me because it seems like he's a jump shot away from being really good.
Yeah, I think he's going to have the size to defend. Now, the defensive numbers were not like incredible at Texas, but that was a bad team. I mean, they did go decently far in the tournament. They won a couple games, I think, but for the most part, not one of the elite teams. He is a little bit older, soon to be 21, but 7-foot wingspan potentially. That's what the projection is. Real quickness, real athleticism to his game. Only took 24% of his shots from 3-point range, but was effective at getting all the way to the basket. As I watched Swain, like my only problem with it was I felt like there was moments in games where he would just disappear, right? And I don't know if that was because Texas had, I think Marks was his last name, who would just try to take over games and kind of Swain would get pushed out of the equation, or if that was his own fault. But I do remember watching several Texas games towards the end of the season, and specifically because I wanted to see Swain, and there was a great matchup, Acuff versus Swain, that took place in Arkansas. If you want to go back and watch one of these games to see what they can do, both players played extremely well in that game. But I think that this is like an upside pick that I'd be willing to like take a chance on. Is a guy that clearly already has some offensive game getting to the basket, knows how to play within the team construct, has defensive upside. It's really just the shot, And the Grizzlies moved away from specialist players, right?
Right.
This is an all-around player. Those are the type of players that I think that they should be focusing on. They moved away from the Luke Kennards, right? And the guys that can't do both. If I'm looking for an all-around player or potential to be an all-around player, I think this guy fits that. So he'll be higher on my list, I think, than most people.
He's a guy who I think the shot probably needs to come around to be a starter. But the shot is like improved. If you look at his 3 college seasons, like it's gone from 15% to 25% to 35%. Like that's a good growth trajectory. I think the shot probably needs to come around for him to be a starter. But it's easy for me to see him being a sort of featured guy on bench units. You could imagine him like handling the ball and operating sort of off the dribble in lineups where you've got like guys like Cam Spencer and Jalen Wells around him spacing the floor, and he's more of a slasher. And a guy he gets compared to a lot in the NBA is Najee Marshall, who sort of is good in that way, right? A guy who can sort of run some offense for you on the second unit, can also defend a little bit. I think there's a lot of utility for guys who have size and physicality and ball skills on the wing.
All right. Do we want to speed up this process a little bit as we go through the rest of
we do, but I want to hear from you on Amari Allen because I have a hard time getting a read on him.
Yeah, it's the same thing as Swain. There were really good Amari Allen moments. I think Alabama's gonna try really hard to convince him to come back to school. And in the end, maybe that's the decision that he makes. We don't know, but he feels like he needs some polish, and maybe he's a couple years away. But like again, rebounds, which is something you want from somebody that's on the wing, but you have that already in Cedric Coward. Decent looking 3-point shot, but pretty inconsistent offensive player throughout the season. I think at the college level, he's just going to be effective because of the size and athleticism relative to some of these other teams that he plays on a day-to-day basis. But I think he could benefit from another year in school. I'm not just saying that because
Right.
I'm an Alabama fan. It just feels like it's not always there. Like it's not consistent enough at this point to feel good about it.
I'm having a hard time getting a read on him. So Cameron Carr and Isaiah Evans, the more I look, the more similar they look to each other. Do you have a particularly strong opinion on preferring one to the other?
No, no, I wouldn't say so. I mean, I feel I don't know where you put Joshua Jefferson in this mix. Like if you consider him to be a wing,
he's gonna be on the third column. I'm putting him in a power forward group with Koa Pete and Alan Graves and some of those guys.
I like him. I probably would be a little bit higher on Evans. Trying to pull up my notes here than Carr. Um, I watched a couple of Baylor games, but Carr never really popped for me. He's a negative defensive or defensive BPM plus, so a negative defensive player last season in college, whereas Evans was a major positive at 8.2.
Yeah, I wonder about the team context on that. Duke versus Baylor is a pretty extreme team context swing, I think. That was my feel anyway.
Yeah.
Like one team functioned very well and one team very much did not.
Yeah. I mean, I would probably lean Evans, but I don't feel strongly about that.
I don't either. They both have good shooting numbers. They're both long. Carr seems to be a little longer. We'll see at the combine, but Carr has a reported 7'2" wingspan at 6'5", which is basically like Cedric Coward frame, except he's lighter. He's not as strong as Coward, but the length is similar to Coward. And also good shooting numbers. I just think the combination of like that kind of wingspan with 38% from three on high volume, 80% from the line, it's kind of unusual to have guys that long wingspan wise who can control their arms well enough to shoot that well.
Yeah. Well, to your point on the team context on defense for Carr versus Evans, I also think offensively, Evans was in a position where there were so many other Duke players that were carrying the load offensively, like usage rate much higher on a guy like Carr. So maybe we don't know the full context of what Evans can do offensively, but I don't feel overly strong really about either of those players. Do we want to talk bigs, or should we save that for one?
We've been going so long. It's up to you. We could try to do a speed round on it if you want to, since this will be the last pod before the lottery.
You know what?
I spent a lot of time writing about Boozer and Wilson. I really like both those guys. There were real questions with both of them, but I really like them both.
Let's save it.
All right.
Let's save it. Let's go to Chicago first. Get the lowdown on all this and talk to some of these players. Hopefully we'll hear from some guys and whether or not they have worked out for the Grizzlies. Sometimes you learn some of that stuff at the combine. So I remember the year that the Grizzlies drafted Zach Edey. I spoke to Zach Edey at the combine, who had glowing things to say about the Memphis Grizzlies and said he thought his workout went extremely well with them, and seemed to be very excited about that. Maybe it was a little bit of a giveaway before that draft. So we'll see what happens this time around. We'll have you covered from there. Go read Chris's columns. Like I said, wing column out. big column will be out soon. My column about luck and everything around Memphis will be out sometime this week as well. Before we get out of here, Chris, there's more to life than basketball. Any thoughts on anything you did this week?
Well, I'm going to get back to my roots on this. I feel like I've been too boring, and then there's more than life of basketball because maybe my life has been a little boring lately. I'm still like Mr. Yardwork guy. The roots of that were when I used to do, actually started at Commercial Appeal, I did the Pick and Popcast podcast, which was a shoot off of the Pick and Pop column. And I would do, whenever I had to have guests on, I would do, there's more than life than basketball. It was a recommendation segment. So my recommendation, based on what you brought up earlier, if you're a Memphian out there and you've never spent any time with like really early Memphis blues, which I think can be a little forbidding to people, it just sounds so ancient, go to Spotify, go to wherever you like to listen to streaming stuff, listen to some Memphis Jug Band. The proto rock and roll band, the Memphis Jug Band of the 1920s, one of my favorite Memphis artists ever, with kazoos and banjos and the whole shebang. Not like, just a solo guy with an acoustic guitar, had a real rhythm to them. Go listen to the Memphis Jug Band. That's my There's More to Life Than Basketball recommendation this week.
I don't have a whole lot to talk about here. We didn't talk about the playoffs. There is more to life than basketball, but I have been watching a lot of basketball. Boston's out, one of my picks is already gone.
Mike Conley had a nice game one in that upset of the Spurs.
He did. I'm worried about my Spurs, man. Timberwolves have the power of belief right now, and it's carrying them. So, been watching a lot of basketball, even though there's more to life than that. Like I said, I've been traveling all around the city. Like, I've literally been driving all around the city, it feels like, for the last 3 days to write this column. The Crystal Shrine Grotto.
I've never been. That's high on the list of, like, Memphis places I've never been to.
Dude, it is like the one thing that I walked in there and I was like, this exists in Memphis. It feels like you're at a European, because it's such a unique thing.
You could just roll on up. Like anybody could just drive in and walk on up, right?
Yeah. So right. if you're cool with going to like a graveyard, like a cemetery, I know some people might feel some way about that. It is in the middle of a cemetery, but I mean, it's the whole thing is kind of cool. And I went when it was pouring rain, so like I had like an umbrella and stuff. But I walked in there, and it's like a Mexican artist made it in like the 1930s. It's like can be a little. I was in there by myself. It can be a little creepy. I'm not gonna lie, but really unique to Memphis. Like I had no idea. And then I checked the book because there's like a little book for people to write where they're from when they come in. And I was reading through the names on the book. The people from all over the world in that grotto. I was shocked. Man-made thing. It didn't exist before. Man-made thing. But, yeah, crazy. So that's There's More to Life Than Basketball this week. That will do it for us. We'll be back next week, probably from Chicago, to talk about some of these players and to discuss the results of the Memphis Grizzlies lottery, the NBA lottery, I should say. So good luck, Grizzlies fans, and we'll see you later.